I think that one of the many hard decisions that Konami has to make or has been making for all of Yu-Gi-Oh's history is which cards you turn into prize cards. Now we had Shonen Jump prize cards and now we have YCS prize cards, and there's a lot of debate about how good or bad these cards should be. It's a very tricky balancing act for Konami because on one hand you really want them to be special cards for the winners of these huge events. If people feel like they don't have any reason to compete and any reason to get first place, they're just not going to go to tournaments. I know a lot of people are hard on Konami for not giving prize support in forms of actual money, but in a lot of cases these prize cards are worth thousands of dollars, and that really makes up for not giving cash prizes. However, in some cases these cards aren't that good, and that does create a tricky situation. Should a card be expensive just because it's the only one or only couple in existence? I mean, the answer is obviously yes, but should Konami go a little bit further and make these cards more playable so that the people that win them can actually play them in decks? The problem with this aspect is that if you make them too good, then it gives an unfair advantage, a vastly unfair advantage to people that have these. And in the case of Yu-Gi-Oh, everyone always complains about it being pay to win and blah blah blah, but in most cases when we're looking at what people are actually playing at events, there are hundreds of people with like the best cards in the game because there's nearly an infinite supply, even of expensive cards like Fantastical Dragon Phantasme. Most of the people at a tournament are going to have that card if they're trying to compete at the highest level. However, in the case of prize cards, they're a very finite resource. At the moment, prize cards go to first, second, and third place at a YCS, with a bunch of them being given out at the end of the year at the WCQs, but for the most part, if there's only been like, let's say 2 YCSs, well now there's only 6 prize cards in existence. In a lot of the cases with more recent additions to the prize card pool, you only really need 1 copy of them in whatever deck you're playing, but especially if you need multiple copies, how can you realistically expect one player to spend thousands of dollars on just a few cards? More importantly, if those cards happen to be broken levels of powerful, then is it really fair that only a few of them are in existence? By putting a card as a prize card, it really puts Konami in a weird bind, because if you ban that card because it's too good, which definitely has happened, and we'll talk about that in today's video, if you do that, now suddenly this card, the only value that it has is because it's a prize card, not because it's a good card. In my opinion, as I'll talk about in this video, I believe that prize cards should be somewhere between broken and bad. Somewhere right in the middle where they're playable but not necessary, and they still reward you for winning them. The reason I'm talking about this today is because at the end of the WCQ, where a whole bunch of people received Chaos Emperor, the Dragon of Armageddon prize cards, that brings a new season of Yu-Gi-Oh! And a new prize card, and oh boy is the new prize card terrible. I know there's a few ways that you can look at this card and maybe sugarcoat it and pretend like it's good, but the new prize card is called Dual Link Dragon, no pun intended, no tie-in with Dual Links here, but it's just called that, and this card is just garbage. I mean, it truly is. I'd be happy to be proven wrong, but I think unless there's like a crazy card this combos with that I'm not thinking of, this thing is just almost unplayable. But being a prize card, it doesn't need to be playable to be expensive. This card, especially the ultra rare version, will probably fetch over $1,000, maybe even hitting $2,000, but in reality most people aren't going to go out and buy this card to put in their deck. Is that okay? Well, I guess it's up for you to decide, or for me to explain in today's video. I think that Chaos Emperor, the Dragon of Armageddon, is actually a good example of a good prize card, because while it was good in Thunder Dragons, you didn't actually need the card to play the deck. It's a one of in the decks that even do play it, which means even though the card is expensive, it's not completely necessary, and that's right where I think a prize card should be. Another great example of this, and in my opinion one of the most balanced decisions for a prize card, was number 106 Giant Hand. Admittedly, a lot of fans of the anime were really angry that Konami picked a number card to be a prize card because it meant it was very expensive. Luckily though, the card eventually would receive a reprint for those more budget conscious players. However, I think the reason Giant Hand is so cool as a prize card is that just like the Chaos Dragon, this isn't a card that you need to play even in a rank 4 deck. Is it a good card? Certainly. If you have access to the card, or if you're willing to shell out the cash for it, you probably should play it in a rank 4 strategy, or at least you should have back when it was a really good card in the meta. However, just because the card was good in some situations did not mean that you needed the card to play a rank 4 deck. Even in deck profiles of people like Corey McDuffie, after they won the NAWCQ in 2014, He even said when he showed the giant hand in his extra deck that it was decent, but it wasn't really necessary for him winning that tournament. Sure, some players are going to go out there and shell all the money to buy cards like that, but in general, it's not a card that you have to have, and it certainly is a good choice in my opinion for that reason. If we're sticking with controversial choices, one of the most controversial prize card decisions that Konami ever made was making Minerva the Exalted Lightsworn a YCS prize card. Lightsworns tend to be a fan favorite deck, and this card totally revitalized the strategy. However, putting this card as a prize card meant that the average player wouldn't actually be able to play this card, and that's a real shame because people were really angry at Konami for not making this awesome piece of Lightsworn support more readily available for more players. However, I think in the same vein, now that we're detached from the situation, this was a pretty decent choice for a prize card, besides the fact that Lightsworn players were angry. And the reason is that Minerva was an awesome rogue deck when this was a YCS prize card, but it wasn't the best deck. You didn't need to be playing this card to win. It was just a cool addition to a more rogue strategy, and that's right where I feel like a prize card should sit. That's not to say all YCS prize cards have been good choices, because I feel like with the new prize card, we're sort of seeing the same thing that we saw with things like Dark Lords or Blood Mephis. These are cards that, while interesting and while some people can make some sort of strategy with them in general, not only are they not necessary, they're also just not very good. Even if you managed to buy 3 copies of each of the Dark Lords when they were coming out as prize cards, you wouldn't really have an efficient deck on your hands. In that way, the value of these cards was hurt almost as soon as they were released, and even though they were prize cards, so they were at least a little bit expensive, a few $100s, they certainly didn't hit the heights of other cards that I've talked about in this video. In other words, I think it's both a problem to make broken prize cards, but also equally as much of a problem to make terrible prize cards. People that are winning tournaments deserve something nice. Certainly it's cool that Konami gives them cards and packs and PlayStations and Xboxes, but they really need a prize card that can sort of make up the value that they lost by sort of investing their time and money to get that first place spot. Speaking of broken prize cards, you might realize that all the prize cards that I've talked about so far are from YCSs, which isn't all of Yu-Gi-Oh's history, and I felt like none of those cards really met the broken status. However, if you look back at the Shonen Jump Championship prize cards, many of these were just simply better than any other card available. The very first prize card in Yu-Gi-Oh's history was Cyberstein, which even back in the day was way better than most cards out there, and if you had that one copy, you basically just had a free win every time you drew it, and your opponent didn't even have the card in their deck. Another one that people think of as being too powerful was Crush Card Virus, and for a good reason. Basically, no trap card in the game was simply as powerful as Crush Card, and actually one of the things that used to happen with these older championships and these truly amazing prize cards is that one person would win one copy, and then they or a teammate would win the next event with that copy to win another copy, and so on and so forth. And in the case of things like Cyberstein and Crush Card Virus, most of those copies of cards back in the day were owned by 1 or 2 teams of players. This meant that they almost had an unbeatable card in their deck that other players didn't have access to, and while Konami got better with it as time went on, those early examples really aren't great. I mean, having powerful prize cards is cool for the players that are winning, but for the players that are going up against those winners, it's a really tough situation if they draw those one-of cards. If you're looking for good examples of prize cards back when the Shonen Jump Championships were happening, look no further than things like Gold Sarcophagus and Doom Caliber Knight. Both these cards are playable, both these cards are competitive, but neither of them is necessary to play whatever decks were popular at the time. Did you have an advantage if you had these cards in your deck? Certainly, but you didn't have an unfair advantage like in the case of Cyberstein or Crush Card Virus. In my opinion, this is what makes prize cards good. They definitely give you bonus points if you have them in your deck, but you don't just automatically win by drawing a Gold Sarc or a Doom Caliber Knight versus things like Crush Card Virus and Cyberstein, where if you draw those cards, you just instantly win those games a lot of the time, especially if your opponent doesn't even have one at all. Anyway though, I think it's going to wrap up today's video about Yu-Gi-Oh! Prize cards and if they should be good or bad. We're really looking at a year of a prize card that's not very playable, and like I said, I'd love to be proven wrong, but I think it's one of those cards sort of similar to Utopia Kaiser, where it's really not used in anything, but someone takes it to a regional just to have fun. We saw things like Ascension Sky Dragon also fall under that category. Just because these cards aren't competitive doesn't mean they're not going to be valuable, but they're not going to be nearly as much of a value to the YCS winners players and people getting second and third place as they would have been if they were at least playable in competitive strategies, even rogue strategies like Minerva was. Anyway though, thank you guys so much for watching today's discussion video. I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.